John Marshall became the fourth Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court in 1801. Historians credit him for establishing the Supreme Court's role in federal government. He was born on September 24, 1755, near Germantown, Virginia. As a young boy, Marshall's father was heavily involved in politics and was a good friend of a young George Washington. Ambitious to take part in the creation of a new nation, Marshall served in the Continental Army at the age of 20. He endured the hardships of the winter at Valley Forge. Although he was mainly homeschooled, Marshall did spend 1 year at Campbell Academy with 5th President James Monroe. The only formal legal education he would receive was at the College of Mary and William, where he briefly studied law. It was at this time when he met his future wife, Mary Willis Ambler. In 1797, President John Adams convinced him to serve as an envoy to France, where he became involved in the XYZ affair. Upon returning, Adams offered him a seat on the Supreme Court, but Marshall declined the offer and was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. On January 20th, 1801, Adams nominated Marshall to be Chief Justice of the United States. Marbury v. Madison was the first Supreme Court case to declare a law unconstitutional. In Magallo v. Maryland, Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the opinion for the case that defined the powers of a state over the federal government. Considered to be one of the most important decisions of the early Supreme Court, in Gibbons v. Ogden, this court ruled that the Federal Commerce Clause outranked a state law. Over the course of his 34-year career as Chief Justice, John Marshall delivered more than 1,000 decisions and penned more than 500 opinions. He determined the Supreme Court's role in the federal government and established it as the ultimate authority in interpreting the Constitution. Marshall served on the Supreme Court until his death on July 6, 1835, at the age of 79, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Liberty Bell was rung during his funeral procession as a commemoration to this great Supreme Court justice.
This is the Supreme Court case of Korematsu versus the United States of 1944. This court case originated in San Leandro, California. This was argued on October 10th to the 11th of 1944 and was decided on December 18th of 1944. This was a result of World War I and World War II, especially the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which influenced the decisions made by many officials in the office. While the Japanese military dominated the Pacific, many Americans turned their fears and outrage on people of Japanese descent. President Franklin D. Roosevelt acted by signing Executive Order 9066. This authorized any designated commander to limit and even prohibit some people from being in certain areas. Soon after, Congress passed a law that imposed penalties for those who violated restrictions on people of Japanese origin. This included curfews and forced removal to assembly and relocated to internment camps. This is a picture of Fred Korematsu. Korematsu evaded the order and moved to a nearby town, changed his name, and claimed to be Mexican American. He was later arrested and convicted of violating Exclusion Order No. 34 issued by General Dewey. Korematsu challenged his conviction in the court, saying that Congress, the President, and the military authorities did not have the power to issue the relocation orders, and that he was being discriminated against based on his race. The government argued that the exclusion and internment of Japanese Americans was justified because it was necessary to the war efforts. They said there was an evidence that some Japanese Americans were involved in espionage, and argued that because there was no way to tell the loyal from disloyal, all people of Japanese descent had to be treated as though they were disloyal. The government argued that the evacuation was necessary to protect the country. The Federal Appeals Court ruled in favor of the United States, and Korematsu's appeal brought to the issue before the U.S. Supreme Court. This went to the Supreme Court because it violated both the 5th and 14th Amendments of Korematsu. The court sided with the government and held that the need to protect against espionage outweighed Korematsu's rights. Justice Black argued that compulsory exclusion, though constitutionally suspect, is justified during circumstances of emergency and peril.